Trooper didn't know he was being filmed when he walks up to homeless woman panhandling. As the trooper stepped out of his car, Lynn Murphy's heart sank. She never imagined this roadside encounter would spark an extraordinary chain of events, one that a bystander's camera was already capturing. Lynn Murphy wasn't always the woman you see today, weathered, clutching a battered cardboard sign, and standing against a backdrop of indifference. Once, not so long ago, she was like anyone else, a working mother with dreams, a steady income, and a modest apartment that smelled of home-cooked meals. But life has a peculiar way of unraveling, thread by fragile thread. The unraveling began with a storm. Not the kind that sends raindrops tapping on windows, but a storm of loss. First came the divorce. The man she had built her life with walked away, leaving her with 4 small children and a mortgage that suddenly felt like an anchor. Then came the job loss, another casualty of budget cuts at her small firm. Bills piled up like forgotten promises, and soon the eviction notice arrived. One moment, she was a mother tucking her kids into bed, and the next, she was standing on a cold sidewalk, everything she owned stuffed into garbage bags. But the truly haunting part? No one noticed her disappearance from the world she once knew. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors stopped waving. Lynn became invisible, fading into the margins of society where the struggling are rarely seen, let alone remembered. And now here she stood, on a busy Massachusetts street corner. The day was unremarkable to anyone passing by. Just another Tuesday in early spring. Traffic whooshed by, headlights gleaming in the overcast light. The occasional gust of wind tugged at Lynn's fraying jacket, but she stood firm, holding her sign close to her chest. It read simply, "Mother of 4. Anything helps. God bless." It was a short plea, but to her, it carried the weight of her entire existence. The cardboard might as well have read, "Look at me, please." But no one did. Commuters averted their eyes. A young couple in a sedan quickly rolled up their window. Even pedestrians crossing nearby seemed to find sudden fascination with their phones or the ground beneath their feet. The indifference stung more than outright rejection. Lynn's legs ached. Her stomach growled. A cruel reminder that the single granola bar she had split between her children the night before wasn't nearly enough. But worse than the hunger or the exhaustion was the gnawing fear. Panhandling was illegal here, and every minute she stood exposed on this corner was a gamble. Then she saw it. The black and white silhouette of a state trooper's car emerged on the horizon, its presence unmistakable. Lynn's heart leapt to her throat. She froze, cardboard sign trembling in her grip. "Not today," she muttered under her breath, as if pleading with fate to show her some mercy. The cruiser slowed as it approached, its siren mercifully silent. Lynn braced herself, already rehearsing the apology she'd given countless times before. But to her surprise, the car glided past her without stopping. Relief swept over her like a wave. She exhaled, shakily, daring to believe she might have escaped the scrutiny. For now. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. Lynn's eyes stayed glued to the ground, avoiding any further chance of drawing attention. But then, from the corner of her eye, she saw it again. The same cruiser, this time making a deliberate turn back toward her. Her heart sank. The vehicle pulled up slowly, tires crunching against loose gravel. The door opened with a foreboding creak, and out stepped the trooper. His figure was imposing, clad in the crisp uniform of authority. His face was unreadable, calm, yet firm. For a moment, Lynn felt like a deer caught in the headlights, unable to move or think. She wanted to run, but where would she go? "I'll leave," she blurted out, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble." The trooper said nothing at first. He simply took a measured step forward, his boots crunching against the pavement. Lynn squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the lecture, or worse, the citation. She thought of her kids, huddled in a shelter a few blocks away, waiting for her to return with food she didn't have. And then something unexpected happened. The trooper's hand reached for something. Not his handcuffs, not his ticket book, but a plain brown paper bag. Lynn opened her eyes, confused. The trooper crouched slightly, placing the bag in front of her. Without a word, he sat down on the curb beside her, a calm presence amidst the chaos of the street. What could he possibly want? And why wasn't he speaking? Lynn's first instinct was to leave, quickly, quietly, before the situation escalated. "I'll go," she stammered, taking a shaky step backward. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'll leave right now." But her feet didn't move. Her mind raced through the possibilities. Fines, arrest, a record that could make her situation even worse. If she were taken in, what would happen to her kids? The thought clawed at her, sharp and relentless. She imagined the tears on her children's faces, the confusion, the unanswered questions. Where's Mom? Why isn't she back yet? Her hands trembled, barely able to hold the sign she had been clutching all day. Her throat felt tight, her breath shallow and uneven. The sting of tears blurred her vision, but she dared not let them fall. Crying would only make her look weaker, more guilty, more vulnerable. Her pulse thundered in her ears as the trooper came closer, each step amplifying her fear. This was it, the moment she had dreaded since the day she took to the streets. "Relax," the trooper said, his voice calm, almost gentle. It was not what she expected. Lynn stopped breathing for a moment. "No Hearthstone, no Kurkomans." His eyes met hers, steady, not cold, not judging. She searched his expression for signs of the reprimand she had braced herself for, but there was none. Instead, there was something softer, something she hadn't seen in a long time. Understanding. He shifted his weight slightly, his posture at ease. "You're not in trouble." The words hung in the air, defying her expectations. She blinked, unsure if she had misheard. But then he spoke again, and this time it all came together. "I saw you earlier," he said. "I thought you might need something to eat." Her heart skipped. It took a moment for his meaning to settle in. Slowly, hesitantly, she let her guard down, just a fraction. Her eyes darted to the brown paper bag he held. He reached out, not as an officer handing down punishment, but as a person offering something simple, something kind. The bag wasn't just a bag. It was a gesture, an opening, a reminder that not everyone on the streets saw her as a nuisance. And at that moment, it broke something inside her. Not in the way she feared, but in a way she hadn't felt in years. Tears welled up again, but this time, she let them come. They weren't tears of fear or frustration. They were something else entirely. Relief, perhaps. Gratitude. Even hope. She looked at the trooper, searching his face for a reason, an explanation. But all she found was the same steady, quiet compassion. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. And then he did something that startled her more than anything else that day. He sat down. It was an unremarkable curb by most standards. Cracked, litter-strewn, hardly a place to rest. But as the trooper lowered himself to sit beside her, it transformed into something different. A place where, for a few minutes, the unspoken divide between their worlds dissolved. Lynn didn't reach for the food immediately. She stared at the bag, unsure if it was real. When she finally opened it, the simple sight of a sandwich and a bottle of water nearly undid her. It wasn't much, but in that moment, it was everything. Her hands shook as she unwrapped the sandwich. She felt the trooper's gaze, not probing, not impatient, just there. Watching, waiting. They sat in silence at first, the bustle of traffic around them. But it wasn't the uncomfortable silence she had come to know on the streets. It was warm, unforced. Between bites, the trooper spoke, not about rules or citations, but about life. He asked about her kids, her plans, her story. And she told him, haltingly at first, then with more ease. She told him things she hadn't said aloud in months, perhaps years. She hadn't realized how much she missed just talking. It was strange how something so simple, eating with someone who didn't look at her like a problem, could feel so profound. The sandwich, the water, the company, it all became a small refuge from the relentless grind of survival. For Lynn, that curb became more than a patch of concrete. It was a reminder of something she had almost forgotten. Not everyone walked past. Not everyone turned away. She didn't know if she'd see the trooper again, and maybe it didn't matter. In that moment, he'd given her something more valuable than food. He'd given her a glimpse of herself, reflected not in pity, but in simple human kindness. The noise of the city continued around them. Cars honked, engines roared. But for Lynn, sitting beside a stranger who had chosen compassion over judgment, the world felt quiet, if only for a moment. Amid the hum of passing traffic and the quiet exchange on the curb, someone else noticed. A bystander, out on their afternoon walk, paused a few paces away. At first, they didn't fully understand what they were witnessing. A uniformed state trooper seated on the sidewalk beside a homeless woman, both sharing a humble meal. But the scene had an undeniable gravity, a rare tenderness in a world so often rushing past. The bystander fumbled for their phone. They didn't interrupt. They didn't speak. They simply framed the moment, pressed the shutter, and captured an image that would come to mean far more than they could have guessed. The photograph was still and raw. No filters, no captions. Just a woman who had been invisible for so long, now sitting beside someone who chose to see her. Hours later, that same bystander posted the image on social media. It didn't have an elaborate caption, just a brief, heartfelt reflection on witnessing an act of quiet kindness. But sometimes that's all it takes. By morning, the post had gained unexpected traction. Likes turned into shares. Shares turned into conversations. Comments flooded in, each one a testament to the impact of that simple, fleeting moment. "Wow, this gives me hope," one user wrote. "We need more people like this officer," another said. "This is what humanity should look like," added yet another. People began tagging their friends. Soon, hashtags like #everydayheroes and #kindnessmatters were trending. News outlets picked up the story. Articles popped up on local websites and quickly spread to national platforms. The photograph, now viewed by thousands, became a symbol of what one small gesture could mean to someone in need. The Massachusetts State Police issued a statement, commending Trooper Luke Bonin for his actions. It was a rare acknowledgement from an institution often associated with strict rules and enforcement. But this time, they chose to highlight something more fundamental: compassion. The statement read, "Trooper Bonin's choice reminds us that law enforcement isn't just about maintaining order. It's about upholding humanity." This simple act is a testament to the power of empathy in making a difference. The coverage continued to grow. More interviews, more articles. Journalists sought out Murphy, who now had a platform to share her story. She spoke of her struggles, her children, and the fleeting moments of kindness that had sustained her through dark times. Before long, nonprofit organizations reached out. One group offered her temporary housing. Another provided resources to help her get back on her feet. Donations came in, some small, some substantial, but each one carrying the same message: "We see you. You matter." For Trooper Bonin, the attention was unexpected. To him, it had been a simple decision, a small moment of humanity. He wasn't seeking recognition. He never imagined that a photo taken by a passerby would spark a movement of goodwill. Yet, there was a single image that turned a private act into a public reminder of what people are capable of when they choose to help rather than pass by. For Lynn Murphy, the photo represented more than a moment frozen in time. It was the starting point of a shift she never anticipated. Offers of support, both emotional and practical, began to rebuild what had once seemed irreparably broken. Her story resonated not just because it highlighted the hardships of being homeless, but because it showcased the transformative power of even the simplest gestures of care. And so, the image traveled. It crossed digital boundaries, finding its way into inboxes, group chats, and dinner table conversations. It was shared and reshared, reminding people that a little bit of kindness can go a long way. In a world often defined by division and distraction, this small moment became something larger, a quiet testament to the good that still exists, and how it can ripple outward to touch countless lives. For Lynn Murphy, that single moment on the curb became more than an act of kindness. It was a reminder, stark and undeniable, that she was still visible. After months of feeling like a ghost, like someone who had fallen so far from society's gaze that she no longer existed, the trooper's compassion brought her back into focus. The realization that someone cared, truly cared, was profound. It changed how she saw herself. Murphy began to think of her own worth, not just in terms of her struggles, but also her resilience. The gratitude she felt that day gave birth to something more: hope. It wasn't instantaneous. Life didn't magically reset, but the seed had been planted. In the days that followed, as help began trickling in from unexpected sources, she started to believe in possibilities again. She began to make plans, tentative and fragile at first. Shelter became a stepping stone rather than a destination. With a roof over her head and food for her children, she started exploring work options. Support from charitable organizations allowed her to enroll in a skills program, something she hadn't thought possible just weeks before. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to imagine a future, not just surviving from one day to the next, but truly living. What Trooper Bonin did may have seemed small in the moment: a meal, a kind word, a gesture of humanity. But small acts often carry the greatest weight. They have the power to pull someone back from the brink, to remind them that they are more than their circumstances. Murphy's story is proof that kindness doesn't need to be grandiose. You don't have to solve someone's problems overnight, nor do you need vast resources to make a difference. A sandwich, a smile, a willingness to listen, these things can be enough to restore someone's faith in the goodness of others. What's more, these moments don't require permission. You don't need a title or a badge to show compassion. Anyone, at any time, can choose to step out of their routine and do something kind. And when they do, the ripple effects are often far greater than they ever imagined. Murphy's transformation, sparked by a single encounter, is a call to action for everyone. It challenges us to look at the people we pass by, to see their humanity, and to offer a hand, even if it's just for a moment. Because those moments matter. They can shape lives. Beyond Murphy's personal journey, the ripple effects of that one shared meal have continued to grow. The story has been told and retold, each retelling inspiring someone new to take a chance on kindness. Online forums are filled with readers recounting how the story moved them to buy a meal for a person on the corner, to donate to a local shelter, or to stop and have a conversation with someone they might have otherwise ignored. More than that, the story has elevated awareness of the challenges faced by the homeless. It's prompted discussions about what society can do, what each of us can do, to create a world where no one feels invisible. The combination of a viral image, a heartfelt narrative, and the genuine humanity behind it has turned a single act of kindness into a long-lasting movement. As the story continues to be shared, it carries a message that is both simple and powerful. We see you. You matter. It reminds people that even in a busy, sometimes indifferent world, a small act can shine brighter than 1,000 headlines. And in a time when it's easy to feel powerless against the larger problems of the world, this story offers a counter-narrative. You can make a difference. Even if it's just for one person, on one afternoon, on one ordinary curb. All it takes is the willingness to see someone and to let them know they're not alone. Kindness can have an extraordinary impact, even in its simplest forms. A small gesture, offering a meal, sharing a conversation, can restore hope, dignity, and a sense of belonging to someone who feels invisible. Such acts remind us that compassion isn't about fixing everything at once. It's about taking one moment to see someone as they are and to help them feel valued. It doesn't take a grand gesture to make a profound difference in another person's life. Anyone can choose to act with empathy, to lend a helping hand, and to remind others that they matter. When we show kindness, no matter how small, we not only uplift others but also set an example that can ripple through communities and inspire others to do the same.